Okay, next up, we have Chika Okafor, who's a PhD candidate at Harvard, and we'll be describing some work on all things equal, social networks as a mechanism for discrimination. So over to you, Chika.
So good afternoon. As you mentioned, my name is Chika Okafor, and I'm an econ PhD student at Harvard, and I'll be presenting my paper, All Things Equal, Social Networks as a Mechanism for Discrimination. So let's imagine a world that in many ways satisfies the dreams of those who seek greater equity in society. There is no historical discrimination. There are no achievement gaps in education. There is no psychological prejudice, no sexism, nor racism. In short, there are no differences between majority and minority workers in ability, employment, or social network dimensions. This introduces the main research question. In this more utopian world, would labor market disparities still arise between majority and minority workers over time? As I will show later in this presentation, the short answer is yes, labor market disparities do still arise due to homophily, the tendency for people to associate more with others similar to themselves. To answer this research question, I extend Montgomery's 1991 referral model to incorporate two-dimensional heterogeneity. Unlike the original model, now workers are stratified by majority-minority status, in addition to by high and low ability. This model has two time periods and a continuum of workers. In the model, workers are either majority or minority, based on the relative share of the labor force. Half of the workers in each group are high ability and half are low ability. So basically, majority and minority workers have the same average ability in both time periods. Firms cannot tell which workers are majority and which ones are minority. Hence, there is no possibility for any kind of prejudice coming from firms. Each firm sets wages before learning the productivity of its worker, and firms are free to enter the market in either time period. The timing of the model is as follows. First, firms hire all period one workers through the general market. Then production occurs, which allows firms to learn the productivity of the worker it hired. Social ties are then determined between period one workers and period two workers based on the social network parameters, which I'll describe in a second. If a firm decides to hire through an employee referral, it sets a referral wage offer. So the wage for someone hired through referral. If the employed period one worker has a social tie, they relay this information on the referral wage offer to their period two acquaintance. Each period two worker compares all referral wage offers that they receive, and they choose the highest one. And then period two workers that have no referral wage offers, or those who refuse all such offers, go on and get hired through the general market, which is the market without referrals. So here are the model parameters. The top ones are pretty straightforward. Majority share of the labor force is delta. The chances of knowing workers of the same ability is alpha. The chances of having a social tie at all is tau max for majority workers and tau min for minority workers. Psi mag reflects the type in-group bias, which captures the majority group homophily, or the extent to which a majority worker's social tie is disproportionately with another majority worker. The full parameterization of this in-group bias can be found in my paper. So before discussing how the model predicts discrimination against minority workers, even given equal network parameters, let's discuss some basic equilibrium properties of the model. First, a firm will attempt to hire through referral if and only if it employs a high ability worker in the first period. This is because of the ability in-group bias. In other words, high ability workers are more likely to know other high ability workers. And so relying on a referral from a high ability worker increases the chance that you'll get another one in the second period. So this means that a disproportionately high number of low ability workers find employment not through referrals, but through the general market, which drives down the market wage in the general market compared to in the referral market. And the market wage in the general market is below the average productivity of the entire population, which is 1/2, because it's 1 for high ability and 0 for low ability. Finally, firms hiring through this non-referral general market earn 0 expected profit, while the firms who make referral offers, i.e. the firms who hire high ability workers in the first period, earn positive expected period 2 profit. Now let's move on to the propositions that show that minorities will be disadvantaged in the labor market, all else equal. Proposition 1A basically states that given the same network parameters between majority and minority workers will receive a disproportionately low volume of job offers through referral. This is particularly significant for the welfare of minority workers because referral wages are higher than wages from the general market, a fact that is proven in the paper. Now, let us explore the intuition behind this inequality in the distribution of referral job offers using a simple numerical example. Suppose there is one minority worker and two majority workers, both in period 1 and in period 2. Also suppose that there is a 2/3 chance of forming a social tie if workers of the same majority-minority type interact, and a 1/3 chance of forming a social tie if workers of different types interact. Hence, there is homophily or a type in-group bias. Also suppose that all three period 1 workers interact with all three period 2 workers. The number of social ties a majority period 1 worker forms with majority period 2 workers is 4/3, or 2 times 2/3. And the tie with minority period 2 workers is 1/3. Hence, the fraction of same type social ties for majority workers is 4/5, or 0.8. One can similarly calculate that the fraction of same type social ties for the period 1 minority worker is 0.5. Now, let us apply these same type social tie dynamics to a referral context in which period 1 workers each have just one social tie. The fraction of referral job offers going to majority workers is simply the probability of period 1 workers majority times the probability of period 1 majority worker knows a period 2 majority worker, plus the probability of period 1 workers minority times the probability of period 1 minority worker knows a period 2 majority worker. Filling in the values we just calculated on the previous slide gives us a value of 0.7. Hence, only 30% of referral job offers would go to minority workers, even though they occupy 1/3 or 33% of the labor force. What this demonstrates is that the same level of type in-group bias has a stronger effect on the incidence of same type social ties for the larger social group, creating a dispersion in the distribution of referral job offers and disadvantaging minority workers or the workers from the smaller social group. Proposition 1B states that this inequality in the distribution of referral job offers between majority and minority workers can be eliminated by minority workers having a sufficiently higher type in-group bias. The graph below shows how this compensating in-group bias increases as the majority group occupies a greater share of the labor force. Both of these graphs are constructed assuming all other relevant social network parameters equal 0.8. The graph at the very bottom shows the compensating net density, or the likelihood of a minority workers having social ties in the first place. As you can see, reaching parity through minority workers having more social ties is only attainable if the majority group is not too large a share of the population. The compensating network density is only attainable when the majority labor share is less than approximately 0.63, given these parameters, 0.8 for the other values. Finally, Proposition 3 states that there will be a welfare gap, i.e. a gap in the average expected wage between majority and minority workers, all else equal. This result follows from Proposition 1A. Since workers accept the highest referral wage offer received, and since majority workers receive a disproportionately high number of referral offers, this drives up the expected referral wage that majority workers ultimately accept compared to minority workers. These graphs are all constructed assuming that all other social network parameters equal 0.8. The graph at the top left shows that as the majority share of the labor force increases, the welfare gap between majority and minority workers also increases. This welfare gap also increases as the majority network parameters increase, i.e. the likelihood of having a social tie or tau match at the bottom right, and the majority in-group bias, the homophily parameter psi match at the bottom left. As those parameters for the majority group increase, so does the welfare gap between majority and minority workers. So to conclude, the model presented in this paper assumes full equality in the initial time period and no discriminatory motives by firms in all time periods. Still, the model predicts that minority workers will receive over time a disproportionately low volume of job offers through referral, as well as lower expected wages. This paper makes several contributions. First, the paper reveals the limitations of both dominant models of discrimination in economics, both the taste-based and the statistical models, and does so using mainstream economic theory. In short, neither of these dominant economic models of discrimination capture the discrimination uncovered in this paper. In fact, this paper provides one of the first rigorous mathematical defenses of what sociologists term institutional discrimination. Third, this paper isolates a potential underlying mechanism for inequality, one that might help explain racial and gender wage gaps that have been widely studied across the social sciences. Past research has suggested that up to 50% of actual jobs are determined via job referrals. Fourth, this paper makes predictions on when disparities might arise, as well as when they might not. And finally, in making all these contributions, the paper disproves one of the primary justifications for colorblind policies, namely that they are inherently merit enhancing. This paper demonstrates that even in a world in which there is no historical discrimination and in which there is full equality in the initial time period, having policies that explicitly avoid confronting disparities between majority and minority workers may contribute to unfair distributions of jobs, wages, and welfare. Thank you, and with that, I will open up to questions.